what are these things? 3.5-inch floppy disks. They're getting tossed. Why are they getting tossed? Well, I don't know if I even have a device that'll read these anymore. It held a whopping 1.44 megabytes, as I recall, of data. But I must have this data somewhere else. There's something with a cryptic title called Colorado Vector Data. It's probably roads, rivers, railroads, maybe contour lines for the state of Colorado. Maybe I should save one of these, because someday in the not too distant future, and maybe some students now will say, what in the world is that device, and how do I read data off it? What kind of data format was on there? Well, in this case, the data format that was on there was probably some sort of old ArcInfo export format. It kind of lends a good bunch of points for talking about, okay, what's different, what stayed the same in terms of GIS and computer technology? Well, certainly we've come a long ways, haven't we, in terms of storage, in terms of accessing volumes and varieties of different spatial data and storing that data. One thing, though, that I often think about is, gosh, are we going to be able to access old data in the future? How do we do that? Here I've got some CDs, and at some point I'm going to need to toss these, I'm sure. I don't read and write CDs all that much anymore. It was always kind of a problematic process, right? You'd be in the middle of writing a CD, and all of a sudden something would go, I don't know, haywire, so that you wouldn't be able to finish writing, and you had to get a new CD out. But even more so with these, you used to have to, if you had a big like satellite image or something like that, you'd have to span multiple floppy disks, and sometimes, quite often actually, the last floppy would fail, and you'd have to redo the whole spanning disks process. But you couldn't store a satellite image on one disk, so you'd have to use several disks. Hey, look at this. This is amazing. You know what this is? Let me see if I can figure out what the right side up is. There it is. I've got some data on here, 89.410, 89.654. Probably some sort of data range in a map I was making. So I actually had to type this on a sort of like a typewriter machine, but this card was in there, and while I was typing, these things would be punched out. And then I would have to submit this card and dozens or hundreds more like it to a computer operator that was sort of behind a glass wall that was kind of like going to a bank teller. You slip it underneath this like plexiglass, and it would be stored there with other programmers' card decks, and then that would eventually be run into a computer, and you might get your result in an hour, you might get it the next day. There was no instantaneous gratification on your final output. What was your final output? Well, in my case, it was always a map, some sort of choropleth map that was made with some sort of overprinted characters, like an @ sign and a dash and a slash and an A or something like that to signify dark, and maybe an apostrophe for the light tones on that map. Wow. I might want to save this, because I'm sure a lot of folks don't know what these are anymore. And, you know, I'm glad we're not using this. I'm glad we're not using this. I'm glad we're not using so many of these anymore. I'm really thankful for the ease of data storage, access, use. It also brings up some interesting points about, gosh, are we going to be able to access that data that's stored on these old media in the future? So we might want to think about that as a society. Also, some of the issues are still the same despite the changes in technology. Data quality, where are you going to get your data? How do you format and present your data in map form or tabular form or graph form or report form, so that your readers, your users will understand what you're portraying in that map? So there are some issues that are still the same. Scale. Let me show you this. This is a bunch of USGS topographic maps, and all of these lines on here, points, lines and polygons, roads, contour lines, rivers, and so on, those were all scribed by hand, if you can believe that. One map might take a couple of years to make, from the original aerial photography to the final printing of the cultural names and so on the map. That might take a several-year period. I know some old USGS topographers and cartographers that would be in the office working on just a contour plate for 1 to 24,000 scale map for about 6 weeks. These folks were very, very diligent, very tenacious, very high quality minded, and that was all done by hand, etching onto pieces of film. When I arrived at the USGS way back when, 1989, it was just in the transitioning in a lot of the production from the old analog film, which in turn had been a revolution in its time in the 50s from the old copper plates back in the 20s and 30s and earlier. But they were just transitioning a lot of the production to digital means. But these maps right here, like this one made in 1965 and then revised in 1994, that was all done by hand. Amazing. So I might keep a few of those around. I might keep a few of these. I'll definitely keep this one. I think I've got a few more. I might keep a couple of these around. And I've got some of these left, but at some point I'm going to save one of them so I can sort of put it in a media archive. All right, well, thanks for journeying down the Carto-Geo memory lane with me for a moment. But think about the issues that we've talked about here: storage, data formats, quality, access, your final production, and it's all firmly etched in the history of cartographic and geographic and GIS processes. So, great things to think about and talk about. All right, take care.